I would like to introduce our next section on the Furman Advantage. Connie Carson is the Vice President for Student Life at Furman University, and Beth Puntari is the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Furman University.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk about the work we've been doing maybe about 12 years or so at Furman University. I'm Beth Puntari. I'm the Vice President and Provost at Furman. Connie's my colleague in Student Life. And just from the start, I want you to notice that we're here presenting together. Okay? And that's part of the reason why what I'm going to share with you is working, because we have a true collaboration and an authentic partnership with these divisions. And we talked a little bit about that, right? So if you're talking about a community around well-being, you're going to have to bring those two key parts, along with the rest of your university. But when it comes to student-facing, those two places on campus, the students don't know the difference. They really don't, right? They don't know that residence is not academics, so we have to sort of pull all those things together. So my charge today was to tell you a little bit about the Furman Advantage and kind of how we got there, key steps so that you could take away perhaps some of the things that we were able to do. Some things you will hear me say first. I think if you, whatever it is you're trying to do, try to center it from your existing strengths and culture. And so I want to talk a little bit about that for Furman. Of course, there's always, you're trying to do more and you're trying to better, but it helps to really go within what your university already values and to some extent is good at. But at the same time, be open for opportunities and learning and partnerships. So we are really fortunate with one particular partnership that I will tell you about, but also being willing to partner across your campus. And then you will notice there's a lot of data here. We're very data-driven, and that came out in many of the conversations I think we've had so far. So let me tell you a little bit about Furman. Furman actually turns 200 in 2026. So y'all are probably like, whoa. Yeah, we're one of the 50th oldest universities in the country. We're a liberal arts and sciences university. Right now we're sitting at about 2,500 undergraduates. We would like to have more, so please send some our way. You know what I'm talking about. It was very traditional liberal arts curriculum, a deep liberal arts curriculum, a lot of majors. We also have interdisciplinary minors, but we also have interesting, more professional majors. We have a business department, comm studies. So we have a lot going on at Furman. From the work I'm going to tell you about, we have been landing in the most innovative lists for a few years. So I think you'll see that's one of the things we're known for. We're situated in Greenville, South Carolina. Everyone's moving there. Come on down. It's beautiful. But we're lucky to be in a place that is really kind of going in the right direction in terms of economies. We don't have the demographic cliff there, which is interesting, and that's why all the Northeastern schools are coming and getting our students stay in the Northeast. But so that gives you a sense of who we are at Furman. If you arrived at Furman's campus decades ago, though, you would have noticed then, even then, that we've been a student-centered campus for a long time. I started there in 2001 as a psychology faculty. I'm a social psychologist, so I've been dying. This has been awesome for me in terms of our speakers. But just to give you a flavor of this, the high-impact practice idea, we were doing that decades ago before it was a thing. Our first publication between a faculty member and an undergraduate researcher dates back to the 1930s in chemistry, so almost 100 years. We were doing internships in the 70s. Faculty-led study way for almost 60 years, and we're still doing it, which is rare. But also there was a culture of mentoring already on our campus. Our faculty and our staff really saw themselves as mentors already. So when I arrived there in 2001, the expectation was you were going to be working with students in your lab, you're going to be mentoring them, you're going to be understanding their lives sort of holistically on campus. So when I say work from your strengths, we had that at Furman. That foundation was very much there. That is not to say, though, that things were perfect, because not all students were getting those experiences. Okay? There were students that were falling through the cracks, there were equity issues, so that was one of the first things we wanted to attack. Then in 2014, we got a new president, Dr. Elizabeth Davis. She would love to be here, but we are in board meetings right now. She probably would really love to be here. She went on a listening tour, and she recognized all those strengths, but also recognized some of the gaps. Now, a lot of this is fortuitous. Listen to the dates. You've got a slide up here about the Duke Endowment. We are extremely fortunate to be the recipient of support from the Duke Endowment. They support all kinds of things in North Carolina and South Carolina, but they support 4 schools: Duke University, Davidson College, Johnson C. Smith, which is an HBCU in Charlotte, and Furman University. So they provide lots of scholarship dollars for us, but one of the unique things that they do is they actually care about what's going on campuses. So in 2013, and even slightly before this, they saw the mental health crisis happening on campuses. And so they brought the 4 schools together and they said, okay, how are we going to understand this as a group? So they often do this when they sort of are seeing kind of the tea leaves and what's happening in higher ed. And boy, we went at it in a big way. The resiliency report that you see up here is in the pre-readings. And so what we decided to do across the 4 campuses is we took our researchers, our faculty, okay, who were just doing research in this area and said, okay, this is like a big grant, go study. But then we also took our on-campus practitioners and said, as we're collecting data, you need to think about what interventions those data can inform and start doing them. So there was an emphasis on getting data out to higher ed and just your sort of typical research publications. There was an emphasis on also broader interventions, but even on-campus interventions. I started in this project as a researcher, right? And the idea that I would partner with a practitioner on campus and apply my research on campus, that is unheard of. So that, you can imagine, started how Connie and I got to work together. Okay, we were both leads on this project. So we followed the class of 2018 before they got to Furman and after. I think, maybe get this, we have 6,000 variables across 11 waves of data from more than 2,000 students across the 4 schools. Okay, studying resiliency, studying mental health across those 4 years. There were some common trends across the 4 schools, some unique trends, but so you can see fortuitously, we start this conversation around well-being and around what students need, and we're starting to make the connections across academic affairs and student life. One of the things we were able to do is we were seeing the data that were coming out. Furman had some unique things. Academic stress was the highest stress, and more than Duke and Davidson. And that's a good thing and a bad thing all at once. Things like we talked about, roommate conflicts, smaller things, students were experiencing a lot of grief, and so we were able to start implementing interventions. One of those that I'll talk about in just a minute was our Pathways program. So as we started to see, we want all our students to have engaged learning, we want them to be mentored, but we're missing students, and so we realized we needed a 2-year required program. So we piloted that through the money through this grant, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So it's set the stage. We're learning about resiliency and mental health. We're figuring out what modules we need to include in this first-year program as we go along, and we're trying them out. So that's lucky for us that we had that opportunity, and it also cemented the partnership between academic affairs and student life. So eventually, as we're going through this process, this was 2013-14, Elizabeth Davis becomes president. She does her listening tour. She sees the strengths, and what she wants to propose is the Furman Advantage. And so this was sort of the original wording around it. So the Furman Advantage guarantees every student an unparalleled education that combines classroom learning with real-world experiences and self-discovery. That was that engaged learning part. And if you read further, we guarantee that a student will have either research, internship, or study away, or multiples. And we use the word guarantee, which was a little scary for folks. This integrated 4-year pathway guided by a diverse community of mentors. Integrated meant, what's going on in the residence halls, what's going on across the campus, not just in the classroom. Mentors, broadly defined across campus. Preparing students for lives of purpose. There's that purpose word. One of the things that's baked into this is trying to teach students the skill of reflection, because they do not do it, we do not do it as a culture, to help them figure out their purpose. Accelerated career and community impact. One of the driving forces of this whole project was this was right when people were starting to doubt the value of a college education, and specifically a liberal arts education. So what we wanted to do was document its value in being very specific in what we thought students should get, these engaged out-of-class experiences with proper mentoring, opportunities to reflect, and to figure out who they are. So that's kind of the broad strokes of the Furman Advantage. In the meantime, everything's kind of sort of timing. If you remember about 2014, Gallup produces their Gallup-Purdue work, right? Which all of a sudden it's like, let's stop thinking about how much college students are making, and let's really think about what determines thriving after college. And college does produce thriving. And we actually partnered with Gallup, and our alumni were thriving. And their big 6 really reflects exactly what we were trying to do with the Furman Advantage. Experiences like internships and in-depth learning, year-long learning, engagement in campus activities, but also mentoring and relationships. So we have these ideas coming together with the resiliency study. Gallup sort of affirms those. And fortunately, the Duke Endowment introduced us to Gallup, and we were able to partner with them to be our assessment, like a third-party external assessor, which again, very fortunate for us to be able to do that. So we were able to establish baseline on different outcomes that we were interested in. We're still partnering with them. I'll show you some data in a minute. And it also helped us address, what are the barriers? Why are students not experiencing the things we want them to experience? So you can see 4 of the areas that we're focusing on in our assessment with Gallup. And I'll show you some data just to give you a sense. So as we said, one big part of the Furman Advantage was to ensure that students had mentors. Even though Furman had a culture of this, we realized that not all students were getting it. One of the great things about partnering with Gallup is they benchmark. Right, so it's not just you comparing yourself to yourself, you can benchmark across the nation. And so this is I'm going to show you 2 slides of Gallup data. The first one, I have a mentor who encourages me to pursue my goals and dreams. And you can see we've been doing student assessments since fall of 2018, once a year, every year, with the exception of some COVID breaks in the middle there. We also assess our alumni once every 5 years. And we also do their employee engagement. I'm not going to talk about that today because that's a lot of data. But one of the key things we're interested in is mentoring, and you can see over time that we've improved, but most importantly, we're also above the benchmark. Second, my professors at Furman care about me as a person. This is one of their big 6 items. You could see before we even got started, we were doing really well on this realm, and then we've been improving ever since. So we're able to see where we started with Gallup. The data piece is important. I'm showing you some of the positive data. Not everything was positive, right? We learned about the things we weren't doing well in the beginning, and we've been tracking those as well. This is one example of that. One of the things our alumni told us and our students told us, you're not doing the best job preparing us for careers, right? Giving us that purpose, helping us know where to go after Furman. And so one of the things we really focused on, I'll talk about our years 1 and 2 program, but we focused on years 3 and 4 and really seeded a lot of that programming to disciplines and departments and really urged them to work with partners across campus like the Career Center, internships to help students feel more prepared for life after Furman. And as you can see, we've moved the needle here. Furman clearly communicates about resources available to help students prepare for life after college. That's a 20 percentage point increase. That is really hard to do in any data world. The graph to your right just shows you that it's consistent across freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. And I think that has a lot to do with the program I'm going to tell you about in just a second. So we've got partnerships across campus. We have a clear vision built on things that we already do well, but trying to get buy-in across campus, and again, trying to close the gap so that all students have these experiences. So what you need to do is to identify barriers. So the Gallup data, along with other internal data, helped us figure out why are students not getting these experiences. And you can imagine one big one is financial, okay? We focus a lot of our immersive experiences in the summer. Full-time summer research, full-time summer internships. Why don't students do those? Because most of them are unpaid, right? We know that that's a big deal. But we know that these are game changers for them and they're thriving, right? And so with Duke Endowment support, we were able to increase the number of students that we funded in the summer. So there we removed a big barrier. We were also able to give more support for those in need who want to do short-term study away, which tends to be the preference for students now. But perhaps even more important was this issue of students falling through the cracks because they didn't know where to go, they didn't know when to go, they had no awareness about what the opportunities were, right? They didn't know how to navigate the system. And so this is where we really wanted to make sure that we were setting a foundation. Earlier in one of the presentations, the question was, well, how do we get all students to do that thing that you want them to do, whatever preparation it was? This was our answer, and this is what we piloted during the Duke Endowment project. So what we have now is something called the Pathways program. It is a required 4-semester, 1 credit per semester advising program. Yes, 4 semesters. It goes to the end of sophomore year. Advisors meet with 15 students once per week. They have the same advisor over those first 2 years. The cohorts of 15 are determined randomly, and there's a very set curriculum that I'll show you in just a minute. The students are earning credits and getting grades. That was really important. Pass-fail does not work in this environment. For advisors, if they're faculty, it could be in their load, right? So here's another example of the importance. If you want to value it, you're going to have to compensate your faculty around it. We also have staff advisors that can receive stipends. And one of the most surprising pieces of this effort was the impact of our peer mentors in this program. So in the first 2 semesters, each 15-student cohort has a peer mentor. These are extremely powerful relationships. The peer mentors, this is one of the things they say is their best experience at Furman. So inadvertently, we've created yet another high-impact experience for our students through the peer mentoring piece. And so really what we were trying to establish is, what's everything you want a student to know and when, right? When do they need to know about resources? How do we give them coping skills? How do we help them navigate campus? So this just gives you a little bit around the curriculum. I could do an hour-long presentation on the curriculum alone. There's a report that you have in advance to give you a little bit more details. And this, we started piloting this in 2017, I think. It became a graduation requirement in 2022, so we piloted it for all those years. It took longer because of COVID. So we had about a group of 100 students who would be in the pilot, and we'd compare them to students who were in the control group who did not. So a lot of the data that I'm not presenting today was actually fairly controlled for a higher ed intervention, where you have those that got the intervention and those that did not. Definitely affected things like belonging, satisfaction with advising, participation in engaged learning, access to resources. But we've been changing this curriculum and iterating it now for almost 8 years. Okay? So after every semester, the committee that is responsible for this comes together and looks at all the assessment and changes as is needed. So that first fall, as you can imagine, sort of typical transition to college. Where do I get this? Where's tutoring? How do I deal with the library? Academic integrity, very typical kind of first year topics. But right at midterm, we do a stress management module, okay? So it's not just the what, it's the timing. We do listening with empathy towards the end. That's where roommate conflicts start to emerge. So the data that we gained through the resiliency study, we sort of inserted here, and we keep sort of looking at it and testing it and refining it. In the spring of first year, you could see holistic wellness. There it is. So what's also interesting about the Pathways program, these modules are created by experts on campus. Some of those are faculty, some of those are staff. So together, they're coming to put this program. So then we have people who are having to work together to figure out the curriculum. We also have faculty and staff as advisors. So when I talk about the authentic integration across these divisions on campus, it's really meaningful. And again, the experts who are having these experiences with their students in staff situations are able to tell us these are the kinds of things that students need to learn and when. So in the spring, everything from your sort of traditional wellness to things like financial wellness, right? Learning about debt, learning about loans. We also start to insert some career competencies pieces, because what we're hearing from students, they're thinking about these things too late. The sophomore year, this is really unique. I can't think of any other college that does a required sophomore year program, okay? But what we're trying to do here is get them out into the campus to start thinking about, well, what engaged learning experiences do you want? Okay, where do you go to get them? What experiences do you need to put on your resume to get those types of experiences? And so they're forced to get out to the internship office, go to the career fair, things that we really want them to do. Now we're kind of forcing it. Okay? We can talk about whether that's a good or not good thing, the forcing piece. We think it's something that we need for this, as we heard, this generation. And finally, in the spring, they talk a little bit more about, your identity, telling your story, and what does it mean to be a leader, not in a traditional sense of leading. Right, a more broad sense of leading. So again, it's sort of like, what are all the things you want your students to know? We're covering it here, right? So when you talk about the integration of their academic lives, their personal lives, their social lives, their residential lives, it's all coming together in this program. I could talk all day about the analysis and assessment of this program. We've got tons of data, but the one data point that I will share with you, we did not create this to be a retention program. Okay? We created it because we wanted an even playing field for all students who come to Furman so that they can experience the Furman advantage. That was our initial goal, right? How do you make sure that all students get the student experience that Furman is offering? This was our answer to that, but what we found is it certainly is helping retention. So we are back to pre-pandemic norms for retention. That's what those numbers, that's the gist of those numbers. A lot of schools still are not. And you'll see it's students who sometimes are our most vulnerable are having the best experiences in the classes, okay? Do we have students who say, I don't need this? Yes, of course we do. We still think they do, and we still make them take it. This is still evolving. There are still challenges related to this, but that's really has been our sort of answer to this challenge around the kinds of students that are coming to campus. The great thing about this is, too, it's always changing, it's modular. So as students come to us with different challenges, we'll be able to adjust as needed. So I'm going to bring Connie up to take us home and bring us more on the sort of mental health student life side of things.
I like to do cleanup, so this is a great opportunity to do that. I think what you all can hear is there's so much depth in all of this, but I think the keys that we really want you to walk away with is there are some key elements that we think are just really provide strength to all of this. So when you think about the 4-year residential requirement that we have on our campus, many of you talked about this last night. I heard it coming out in different ways, shapes, and forms. The importance of the lived experience and the practice of this and the doing this with your peers is so important. Housing and residence life is an engagement strategy for our campuses. It's an important one because it really tests that out and you get real-world experience. But you also get advised and mentored there. But the sense of place is also important, and where you live. This is your home. This is your home for the next 4 years. And so sense of place and how you do that engagement is also important. And how do you invest in that space? And Furman has invested heavily in that space. We have renovated every facility that we have, and we just built a new residence hall the first time in 60 years. And in that space, it looks different. All the spaces look different from what they did 25, 30 years ago. But they're nimble enough that we can adjust them for the future. And so that was an important investment for us. The second thing I want to talk about is the well-being task force, or the integrative team that we have on campus. So Beth talked about, I know somebody was using the term, everybody calls everything radical now. That drives me crazy, to be honest with you. Every book is radical. If I ever write a book, it won't have radical in the title. But here's what I will say about that is the collaboration is authentic in the way that is just, it's hard to do in higher ed, and it's unusual to do because we are, we have to admit, we have expertise in all these different areas. Faculty have expertise, and it's depth to it. And so getting people to work together and play together, but this has really infiltrated our campus in such a way that we literally don't do anything differently. So when we have our integrative team, my dean of students and one of our health science professors are the leads for that. But the members of it come from all over campus. It's faculty, it's staff, it's students. And the reason we created it that way is we said thriving is important, but if you think back again to the Gallup work, what do you see about thriving? What do we know? The thing Gallup taught us is that faculty and staff engagement and thriving drives student engagement and thriving, which drives alumni engagement and thriving, which helps us get our people out in the world. And so that's a key component that we always keep in the back of our mind, is if our faculty and staff aren't thriving, and post-COVID, we can all tell unbelievable stories about that, right? And so that was one of the most important things there. And then lastly, this pathways training, and Beth was nice. I always like to call it, we went around the country and we looked at advising and mentoring and who's the best. And you know what we learned? No one claimed to be the best. In fact, it was the advising lottery. There were good ones, there were people who were natural at it, there were some who became good at it, and there were some that were not good at it. And we learned that all over the place. Some hired professionals, some put certain faculty only in the disciplines. And so what we said, we need to close that gap. We need to find a way to do that. And so one of the things that happens in Pathways is that we're able to train a wide swath of faculty and staff over the years in advising and mentoring skills, and that they get to do it in this depth and this way that helps them. And so those are some of the takeaways, but then the piece is, of all of this collaboration, is honestly the integration of strategy and the innovation that comes from that. So I'll give you a couple really quick. So, and I think Georgia Tech might be in this. There are 5 institutions, and Furman is one of them. We are the one that looks not like any of the others. The others are in California, and I think Georgia Tech. There's a company called Wayhaven that has created a coaching app, and it has AI coaching in it. And we have been one of those institutions that has been their pilot for this and building the structure for them in this. And what it does is it coaches students and connects with them. But how we're using it is it's not a therapeutic tool, it's an engagement tool. And so they can ask the questions, and they are getting the Furman information about how to connect, what groups are available, how to re-engage. And it's coaching them through that. And we have students helping us create this as well, and the content. And we've been in the baseline of that. But that has taken people from all over campus, but the power of our students is key in that. And then I think the second one I would say is, it's not our innovation, but it's one that some of you belong to. It was when we joined the Okanagan Charter. And that we felt that was extremely important. This is really an international approach that really pushes into it what I call practices of health promotions and looks at it deeply. So let me turn really quickly. All of this is part of our Furman strategic plan. There are three major pillars: innovation and impact, a thriving community, and a sustainable future. And for us, that is what drives us. So all of this is built into the institutional five-year plan. And so we wanted to make sure you all understood that, because all of this builds. The Furman Advantage was the base of that, but then we built our strategic plan around that. And our value proposition and where we go, our goal is what we want, is to be the best in class in an individualized, impactful undergraduate experience. That's where we want to go. Beth's mentioned some challenges and opportunities, and I won't repeat all of those, but I think the thing that we would say to you that's important is, it's not just about what's changing about students, but what's changing in the workforce. And as we look ahead, we have some worries about that and how we're going to get the workforce who is tired. Post-COVID, people are tired. Faculty have a lot on their plates. Staff have a lot on their plates. How do we rejuvenate? How do we do this? How do we keep this lively? How do we keep this in their front burners? And then how do we afford it? So you can't look at this and not go, boy, there's a lot of money going into this. We say that too. We know that the student experience is really important. And so there are challenges that are ahead. But we feel like the TFA really gave us a pathway, and a nimble pathway, that we can change and adjust over time. So the last thing, we are in the South, and we like to say, what are the secret sauce? So we were thinking about you, what would you take away? We would say, work from your strengths, your campus culture. Every campus has what I would call assets. The assets at Furman may not be your assets. That's okay. You've really got to do it, and that's what I've heard everyone say. Consider funding. Do that up front. Start looking long-term and think and project out, because if you don't do that, it's going to be really difficult to keep it moving. Commit to working across divisions and breaking down those silos and these things that are so important, because they're important for humanity. And so how do we do that and do that well? Build organizational structures around our priorities and do that as an institution. So what I might think is a priority, if it's not a priority to the institution, then we probably shouldn't be spending our time and our efforts there. We need to think institutionally. Robust assessments and continual learning and improvement is the key to anything in academic life, but it's also the key to really meeting our students where they are and our faculty and staff. Identifying those barriers, and then the value proposition. Everything should play into the value proposition of the education that we're providing, which is not just for us. It's for humanity. It's for when people leave us. It's really not about the experience here in our campuses. It's about what they're going to take when they go out in the world and they lead our communities. So we thank you all very much for the opportunity.